The massive holographic display flickered in the dimly lit chamber of the Galactic Council's Research Division. Lead researcher James Miller stood before the projection, his eyes fixed on the swirling blue planet labeled Sol 3. His research team had spent 5 years studying this particular Deathworld, and what they discovered defied everything they knew about planetary classification. "This can't be right," he muttered, adjusting the data streams flowing across his screen. "Run the numbers again." The computer chirped its compliance, and within seconds, the same results appeared. Earth wasn't just any Class 13 Deathworld. It was unique in ways that challenged the very foundation of their understanding. Most Class 13 worlds produced only simple, aggressive life forms, creatures that lived brief, violent lives before being replaced by the next generation. But Earth had somehow spawned a species that built spaceships while still living on their lethal home planet. Miller's assistant, Robert, walked into the chamber carrying fresh data crystals. "Sir, the latest atmospheric analysis is ready. It's interesting." "Everything about this planet is interesting, Robert. What did you find?" "The humans don't just survive their world's conditions. They thrive in them. They've adapted to every climate zone, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. No other known species has shown such environmental flexibility." Miller nodded, adding the new information to his growing database. The more they studied Earth, the more puzzling it became. Other Deathworld species were usually aggressive, territorial, and showed limited ability to cooperate. Humans, however, had built complex societies, created art, and developed technologies despite living on a planet that should have kept them locked in a constant struggle for survival. The chamber door slid open again, and Council member Laura walked in. Her expression was grave. "Miller, the Council needs your preliminary report. They're debating whether to initiate contact or enforce a quarantine." "A quarantine would be a mistake," Miller replied, pulling up his research summary. "Look at these behavioral patterns. Humans show remarkable levels of cooperation and empathy, traits we've never seen in Deathworld species before." Laura studied the data, her brow furrowed. "But their history shows constant warfare." "Yes, but that's not the whole story," Miller explained, bringing up more displays. "They fight, but they also heal. They destroy, but they rebuild. They compete, but they also collaborate. It's a complexity we've never encountered in other Class 13 species." The room fell silent as Laura processed this information. The decision facing the Council was unprecedented. Traditional protocol demanded that all Class 13 worlds be quarantined to protect the galaxy from their inevitably violent inhabitants, but Earth had broken every pattern they'd established. "There's more," Robert added, highlighting a section of data. "Their entertainment, what they call fiction, shows remarkable imagination. They create stories about meeting alien life, about traveling through space. They're mentally prepared for contact in ways no other species has been." Miller walked to the center of the room, where Earth's hologram slowly rotated. This planet should have produced monsters. Instead, it created dreamers. They've taken everything their harsh world threw at them and turned it into a tool for advancement. Laura's communicator beeped, signaling the Council was waiting. "I need your official recommendation, Miller. Contact or quarantine." Miller took a deep breath, knowing his next words would help shape the galaxy's future. "I recommend contact, but not because they've conquered their Deathworld, because they've done something far more remarkable. They've embraced it, learned from it, and used its challenges to grow stronger. They don't just survive their world. They learn from it." The chamber's lights brightened as Laura nodded. "I'll take your recommendation to the Council. But Miller, if you're wrong about them." "I'm not," he said firmly. "Earth isn't just different from other Class 13 worlds. It's different from anything we've ever studied, and I believe that difference is exactly what our galaxy needs." As Laura left the chamber, Miller turned back to the hologram of Earth. Somewhere on that dangerous, beautiful planet, a species waited that had done the impossible. They'd turned a world of death into a cradle of innovation. Now, The galaxy just had to decide if it was ready to meet them. The United Nations Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy. World leaders filled every seat, their eyes fixed on the massive screen showing an approaching alien vessel. After decades of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, they were about to get their answer. Ambassador Thomas Reed stood calmly at the podium, reviewing his notes one last time. His unusual composure had earned him this position, the first human to officially greet representatives from the Galactic Council. While others had panicked during the initial contact simulations, Reed had maintained his steady demeanor. "Vessel entering Earth's atmosphere," announced the military liaison. "Touchdown expected in 5 minutes." Reed watched the screen as the sleek silver ship descended through the clouds. Its design was unlike anything humans had created, smooth, almost organic in appearance. The ship landed with barely a sound in the designated area outside the UN building. The assembly hall fell silent. Even the constant clicking of cameras stopped as everyone held their breath. The main doors opened, and 3 alien figures entered, escorted by UN security. Their appearances varied dramatically. One tall and slender with iridescent skin, another short and robust with scales, and the third seemingly made of crystalline structures. Reed stepped forward, exactly as practiced. "On behalf of humanity, welcome to Earth." The crystalline being moved forward. "I am Grand Speaker Vale of the Galactic Council." "We." The speaker paused, sensors on its surface flickering rapidly. "Your heart rate is remarkably steady, Ambassador Reed. Most species show significant stress during first contact." Reed allowed himself a small smile. "We've been preparing for this moment for generations, Grand Speaker. Through our science fiction, our scientific research, and our space programs. Meeting you feels like greeting long-awaited friends." The 3 aliens exchanged looks that Reed couldn't quite interpret. The scaled one spoke next, its voice surprisingly melodious. "You do understand that your world is classified as a Class 13 death world, the highest danger rating in our system." A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly. Reed's expression remained interested but composed. "Please, explain what that means." "Your gravity is crushing, your atmosphere corrosive, your temperature swings lethal, your flora and fauna extremely dangerous." The scaled being explained. "Most species would die within minutes on your planet's surface." To the aliens' visible surprise, laughter broke out in various parts of the assembly. Reed himself couldn't help but chuckle. "I apologize for our reaction," he said. "It's just that. Well, we've always thought of Earth as rather pleasant." The iridescent alien stepped forward, its skin shifting colors rapidly. "Pleasant. Your world experiences regular natural disasters. Your oceans contain countless lethal creatures. Your land masses are filled with predators." "True," Reed acknowledged, "but we've learned to live with these challenges. They've shaped us, taught us to adapt, to innovate. We've built warning systems for disasters, learned to navigate dangerous waters, and found ways to coexist with Earth's other inhabitants." The Grand Speaker's crystals pulsed with what seemed like curiosity. "Our research showed your violent history. We expected different reactions to our presence." Reed gestured to the assembled leaders. "We've fought wars, yes. We've made terrible mistakes. But we've also written poetry, created music, explored the stars through our telescopes, and dreamed of meeting others who share this vast universe with us." The 3 aliens conferred briefly in their own language before the Grand Speaker turned back to Reed. "In all our records, we've never encountered a species that evolved on a Class 13 world and developed such complexity, such contradiction. You are warriors who create art, survivors who show mercy, predators who practice compassion. We're human," Reed said simply. "We contain multitudes." As the formal proceedings began, Reed noticed the aliens constantly checking their environmental sensors, seemingly unable to believe that such a deadly world had produced a species so at ease with both diplomacy and danger. Later, as the first day of contact drew to a close, The Grand Speaker approached Reed privately. We came expecting to find savages barely contained by their own violence. Instead, we found philosophers who have turned their world's hardships into strengths. Perhaps we have much to learn from Earth after all. Reed smiled. We have much to learn from each other, Grand Speaker. This is just the beginning. 6 months after first contact, Dr. Mark Wilson stood at the observation window of Outpost Gamma, watching human colonists build their settlement on the Class 12 Deathworld of Rigel 6. The alien scientists beside him couldn't hide their amazement as humans worked outside in conditions that would kill most species in minutes. They aren't even wearing full environmental suits, muttered Chief Scientist Bright Crystal, his crystalline form vibrating with disbelief. Just basic protective gear. Wilson nodded, making notes on his tablet. We found that standard spacesuits were too restrictive for construction work. These modified suits provide essential protection while allowing better mobility. Outside, colonists moved heavy equipment through the planet's thick atmosphere. Rigel 6's gravity was 1.3 times Earth's, its air laden with trace amounts of chlorine, and its surface temperature regularly reached 40 degrees Celsius. To humans, it was uncomfortable but manageable. To the rest of the galaxy, it was a death zone. Another successful foundation laid, called out Colony Leader Peter through the comm system. His team had just finished setting the base for what would become the colony's hydroponics facility. That's the third building this week, Wilson noted proudly. We're ahead of schedule. Bright Crystal's assistant, Shimmerwave, adjusted her sensors. What truly puzzles us is their psychological resilience. Other species would be experiencing severe stress responses by now. Wilson watched as 2 colonists helped a third adjust their equipment, all of them laughing about something over their private comm channel. Humans have always turned hardship into humor, he explained. It's how we cope. The observation room's door slid open, and Dr. Rachel Adams entered with new data readings. The soil samples are even better than we hoped, she announced. With minimal treatment, we can start growing Earth crops within 2 months. Impossible, Bright Crystal stated. The soil toxicity levels are well within what Earth plants can handle, Rachel interrupted. Remember, our plants evolved alongside us. They're just as hardy. Outside, a dust storm was approaching. The alien scientists tensed, but the humans simply shifted their work patterns. Some teams moved indoors to continue their tasks, while others secured equipment with practiced efficiency. Look at their teamwork, Shimmerwave observed. Most Deathworld species show strong individual survival instincts, but limited group cooperation. Wilson pulled up historical data on his tablet. Humans learned early that we survive better together. Earth's challenges forced us to cooperate, to share resources and knowledge. It's embedded in our culture now. The dust storm hit, reducing visibility to a few meters. Through the observation window, they could see humans still moving purposefully through the haze, their helmet lights creating eerie patterns in the swirling dust. Your species continues to defy our understanding, Bright Crystal admitted. You not only survive in these conditions, you actively seek them out. This colony was your idea, not a necessity. Rachel smiled. We call it the frontier spirit. Humans have always pushed boundaries, explored harsh environments. It's part of who we are. A cheer came through the comm system. Another team had completed their task despite the storm. Wilson watched as the colonists congratulated each other, their voices filled with pride and excitement rather than fear or stress. I think I'm beginning to understand, Shimmerwave said slowly. Earth didn't just make you strong enough to survive harsh conditions. It made you thrive on challenges. Exactly, Wilson replied. Each obstacle we overcome teaches us something new. Each hostile environment we adapt to makes us better prepared for the next one. As the dust storm began to clear, the humans outside resumed their full construction schedule. The alien scientists watched in continued amazement as the colony took shape, a testament to humanity's unique relationship with hostile environments. Perhaps, Bright Crystal mused, We need to reconsider our classification system. Earth may be a Class 13 death world, but it produced a Class 1 species in terms of adaptability. Wilson looked out at the growing colony, where humans were already making this harsh world their home. We don't just adapt to our environment, he said quietly. We learn from it, improve upon it, and ultimately, we make it our own. The Galactic Council's emergency chamber was in chaos. Holographic displays showed multiple frontier worlds under attack, their defense systems failing against an unknown aggressive species. The attackers moved with brutal efficiency, ignoring all attempts at communication. Admiral John Pierce stood silently, watching the council members argue among themselves. He'd been summoned along with other human military advisors, but so far, they'd only been asked to observe. 15 colonies lost in 7 days, announced Council Leader Vale, his crystalline form pulsing with distress. Our conventional defenses are useless against their tactics. The tactical display showed another colony falling. The attackers' ships were organic-looking, almost insectoid, and they fought with no apparent concern for their own survival. They're using suicide tactics, Pierce said quietly to his colleague, Captain Maria Torres. The Council's military has no protocol for this. They've never encountered an enemy willing to sacrifice themselves to win. The chamber fell silent as new footage appeared. The attacking species had been captured on video for the first time. Tall, chitinous creatures that moved with unnatural speed and attacked with primitive but effective weapons. They're from another death world, Torres realized. Look at their movements, their disregard for environmental hazards. They're used to constant danger. Council Leader Vale turned to the human advisors. You've been unusually quiet, Admiral Pierce. What are your thoughts? Pierce stepped forward, his face grave. You're fighting them wrong, he said simply. You're treating this like a civilized conflict with rules of engagement. This is survival combat, something humans understand very well. Explain, demanded one of the council members. Pierce manipulated the tactical display, highlighting the attack patterns. They're not fighting to conquer, they're fighting to eliminate. This is an extinction event. They see other species as threats to be removed, not enemies to be defeated. The council chamber erupted in worried murmurs. Pierce continued, his voice cutting through the noise. Your military is trained for diplomatic conflicts, for wars with rules. These creatures are fighting like our ancient ancestors did, for pure survival. And you believe humans can counter this? Vale asked. We've spent our entire history learning to overcome exactly this kind of threat, Pierce replied. Earth taught us how to fight against overwhelming odds, but it also taught us something more important, how to win without destroying ourselves in the process. Torres stepped forward, adding to Pierce's analysis. Your current tactics are predictable. You're fighting defensively, trying to minimize losses. Against a survival-oriented species, that's exactly wrong. We need to show them that aggression has a price. The tactical display updated again, showing another colony under attack. Pierce watched the defensive ships trying to maintain formation against the chaotic swarm of enemy vessels. Give us command of the defense fleet, Pierce said firmly. Let us show you how humans deal with threats to survival. The council members exchanged worried looks. Your species' violent history makes us hesitant, one admitted. Our violent history is exactly why we'll succeed, Torres countered. We've evolved past simple survival tactics. We know how to fight smart, not just hard. Pierce pointed to the display. Those attackers are pure survival instinct. We're survivors who learn to think. That's the difference that will save your colonies. Vale's crystalline form shimmed as he considered the proposal. Very well, he said finally. Admiral Pierce, you have command of the defense fleet. Show us what humanity can do. Pierce turned to Torres. Send the order to all human ships in the sector. Tell them to prepare for Plan Delta. Plan Delta? Vale asked. What is that? Pierce's expression was grim but determined. Something we developed after studying Earth's predator species. When faced with a stronger enemy, you don't just fight back. You change the rules of engagement. As the orders went out, Pierce watched the tactical display with focused intensity. Humanity had spent millennia learning to survive on their death world. Now it was time to show the galaxy that surviving wasn't the same as winning. The real battle, he told the Council, begins now. Commander Anna Ross stood on the bridge of the Earth-ship Deterrent, watching her unorthodox battle plan unfold. Instead of maintaining the tight formations favored by the Galactic Council, her fleet was scattered across space in seemingly random patterns. Enemy swarm approaching, Commander, reported Lieutenant Paul from Tactical. They're following the exact pattern you predicted. Ross nodded, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. The insectoid ships moved as a single unit, their attack formation unchanged despite facing a scattered defense. They're operating on pure instinct, she observed. No tactical adaptation. The enemy swarm charged forward, expecting to break through a defensive line that wasn't there. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and in radiation clouds, places most species would avoid. All ships, execute maneuver Honey Badger, Ross commanded, a slight smile playing on her lips. The maneuver, named after Earth's most fearless creature, was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Human ships burst from their hiding places, not firing their main weapons, but instead releasing clouds of specialized nanites. The enemy ships flew straight into these clouds, their organic hulls beginning to itch and burn. They're breaking formation, Paul announced, just like angry hornets when you smoke their nest. Ross had studied Earth's most aggressive insects to develop this strategy. The enemy's hive mind-like behavior had reminded her of wasps, dangerous in a swarm, but predictable if you understood their triggers. Second phase, initiate, she ordered. The human fleet began moving in complex patterns, ones that seemed chaotic, but were actually carefully calculated to exploit the enemy's instinctive responses. Commander, the ship's AI announced, the Council observers are requesting an explanation of our strategy. Tell them we're using Earth's lessons, Ross replied, watching as the enemy ships chased her vessels into prepared kill zones. On our world, the strongest predator doesn't always win. The smartest one does. The battle continued to unfold like a complex dance. Human ships would appear vulnerable, draw enemy vessels into pursuit, then lead them into crossfire from hidden positions. It was a hunting technique learned from wolves, adapted for space warfare. Enemy casualties at 40%, Paul reported. They're showing signs of confusion. Ross nodded. They've never faced prey that fights back smarter, not harder. Launched the sonic disruptors. The next phase of her plan deployed devices that emitted frequencies matching the resonance of the enemy ship's organic hulls. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it made coordinated movement difficult, like trying to run while dizzy. Look at that, she muttered, pointing to a section of the display. They're starting to break into smaller groups. They're learning. Isn't that bad? Asked a Council observer who had been watching silently. No, Ross replied. It means they're abandoning their swarm tactics. Now they're fighting our way, and we're better at it. The battle shifted again. The enemy, forced to fight in smaller units, lost the overwhelming advantage of their numbers. Human ships, trained for independent action, began picking them apart. Enemy retreat detected, Paul announced. They're pulling back to their staging area. Ross shook her head. Not retreat. Regrouping. They'll try to swarm again. But now we know their response times, their decision patterns. She turned to her crew. Prepare for final gambit. The human fleet executed its most daring move yet, appearing to flee in panic, but actually leading the regrouped enemy swarm into a massive gravitational shear between two nearby stars. The enemy ships, following their pursuit instincts, flew straight into the trap. Enemy fleet is trapped in the gravity well, Paul reported. Their organic ships can't handle the stress. They're breaking apart. Ross watched as the enemy force was torn apart by natural forces, Another lesson learned from Earth, where the environment often proved to be the deadliest weapon of all. Battle concluded, she announced. Send word to Admiral Pierce. The human method works. As the Council observers stared in amazement at the tactical display, Ross allowed herself a moment of reflection. Humanity had turned Earth's harsh lessons into strengths, and now those same lessons had saved the galaxy from its first major crisis since first contact. We didn't just survive Earth, she said quietly. We learned from it. And now the galaxy knows why that matters. In the vast research complex on New Geneva, Earth's first off-world scientific center, Dr. Michael Wright stared at the results of a decade-long study. Around him, scientists from across the galaxy gathered to hear his team's findings about humanity's unique evolution. The data is conclusive, he announced, activating the holographic display. Earth's particular combination of conditions created something unprecedented in known space. The display showed Earth's geological history, continental shifts, mass extinctions, ice ages, and periods of intense volcanic activity. Each catastrophic event was highlighted in red, creating a pattern that looked like a chaotic web. Most Deathworlds produce simple, aggressive life forms, Wright explained. But Earth did something different. Each disaster, instead of simplifying life, made it more complex. His colleague, Dr. Emma Foster, stepped forward to point out specific examples. Take the oxygen catastrophe, she said. It should have ended life on Earth. Instead, organisms adapted to use oxygen as fuel, becoming more efficient than ever before. The alien scientists watched intently as the display shifted to show human evolutionary history. But here's the key discovery, Wright continued. Humans didn't just survive these challenges. Each one fundamentally changed how we think. Explain, requested one of the crystalline scientists. Foster brought up brain scan comparisons. Other Deathworld species show enhanced threat response and aggression centers. Human brains show something more, highly developed areas for problem solving, emotional processing, and social cooperation. The disasters forced us to think differently, Wright added. When the climate changed, we didn't just grow thicker fur like other species might. We invented clothing, shelter, and fire. We solved problems instead of just adapting to them. The display showed early human settlements, emphasizing how they spread across different environments. Every challenge we faced, Foster explained, required us to be both physically and mentally adaptable. We couldn't just be strong. We had to be smart. But what about human empathy? Asked another alien scientist. By all logic, a Deathworld species should prioritize individual survival. Wright smiled. That's the most fascinating part. Our harsh environment actually promoted empathy. Humans discovered that cooperation and mutual support were more effective survival strategies than pure competition. The display showed examples of early human communities working together to hunt, build shelters, and care for their wounded. Other Deathworld species typically abandon their weak, Foster noted. Humans learned to heal and protect them, preserving knowledge and experience that benefited the whole group. It was a feedback loop, Wright explained. The more we cooperated, the better we survived. The better we survived, the more we could afford to cooperate. Our empathy became an evolutionary advantage. The alien scientists murmured among themselves as new data appeared. Brain scans showing human responses to various scenarios. Look at this, Foster pointed out. When faced with a threat, humans don't just activate fight or flight responses. We engage multiple brain regions, including those responsible for creative thinking and social consideration. In other words, Wright concluded, Earth didn't just make us strong enough to survive. It made us wise enough to thrive. The presentation continued, showing how Earth's varied challenges had created a species that could think abstractly, plan for the future, and consider complex moral questions. Each disaster in Earth's history had added another layer to human capabilities. We're not just Deathworlders, Foster explained. We're problem solvers. Earth taught us that survival isn't enough. We need to understand, to improve, to grow. As the presentation concluded, one of the alien scientists raised an interesting point. You're saying that Earth's harshness created human compassion. That seems paradoxical. Wright nodded. The greatest paradox of all. Our deadly world taught us the value of life. Every challenge that could have made us more brutal instead made us more thoughtful. We learned to cherish life precisely because we understood how fragile it could be. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth hadn't just produced another species tough enough to survive its challenges. It had created something entirely new, a species that could face the deadliest conditions in the galaxy and respond not with mere survival instinct, but with innovation, cooperation, and hope. Perhaps, Wright said softly, that's why we're different. We didn't just survive Earth. We learned from it. 5 years after the successful defense against the hive mind attackers, the Galactic Council's Grand Chamber looked very different. Human representatives now sat among the various species, and Earth-inspired innovations could be seen everywhere, from the adaptive environmental controls to the practical emergency protocols. David Brown, Earth's senior representative, watched with quiet pride as the latest joint scientific mission reported its findings. The team, a mix of humans and other species, had successfully terraformed a toxic moon into a habitable world using techniques derived from Earth's natural recovery processes. The integration of human methodologies has exceeded all expectations, announced Project Director May Anderson. By applying Earth-based principles of ecological restoration, we've reduced terraforming time by 60%. The council members nodded approvingly. Over the years, they'd learned that humans brought more than just resilience to the galactic community. They brought perspective. Our next proposal, May continued, involves establishing multi-species colonies on challenging worlds. Using human adaptive techniques, we can create communities that thrive in environments previously considered uninhabitable. A holographic display showed the proposed colony designs. They incorporated elements from Earth's most successful habitats, from underground cities inspired by ant colonies to floating settlements based on coral reefs. Humans have taught us something invaluable, spoke Council Leader Vale. The difference between surviving and thriving isn't in our technology. It's in our approach to challenges. David smiled, remembering the early days when the galaxy had feared Earth's deadly reputation. Now, human advisors were sought after for everything from crisis management to artistic endeavors. Their ability to see opportunity in adversity had changed how the galaxy approached problems. The latest education initiative has shown remarkable results, reported Education Director Robert Wells. By incorporating human-style problem-solving exercises, we've seen improved adaptability across all species. The Chamber's attention turned to a display showing various cooperative projects. Human engineers worked alongside crystalline beings to design more efficient ships. Earth doctors collaborated with alien healers, combining different approaches to medicine. Artists from dozens of worlds created new forms of expression together. Perhaps most significantly, David added, standing to address the chamber, we've seen a shift in how the galaxy views Deathworld species. Earth has shown that harsh conditions don't necessarily produce violent societies. The display showed statistics on interspecies cooperation and cultural exchange. What had started as cautious interaction had become genuine collaboration, with different species learning from each other's strengths. The human concept of learning from adversity has revolutionized our approach to challenges, noted a council member. We no longer see difficult environments as obstacles to avoid, but as opportunities to grow. May brought up new images of successful projects, space stations designed with human safety protocols, emergency response teams using Earth-inspired tactics, and research facilities that combine different species approaches to science. Integration hasn't just benefited the galaxy, David observed. Humanity has grown too. We've learned patience from the crystalline species, precision from the methane brothers, and new ways of thinking from every culture we've encountered. The chamber hummed with agreement. The fear that had once surrounded Earth and its inhabitants had transformed into respect and collaboration. Humanity's unique evolution had provided the galaxy with new tools for facing its challenges. Looking ahead, May concluded, we're seeing unprecedented levels of cooperation. Species that once would have avoided each other are now working together, sharing knowledge, and solving problems neither could handle alone. David watched as the chamber discussed future projects. The galaxy had changed, becoming more adaptable, more innovative, and paradoxically, more compassionate. Earth's lessons about survival through cooperation had spread far beyond humanity. "We've proven something remarkable," he told the assembly. "The most dangerous world in known space produced not monsters, but innovators, not conquerors, but collaborators. Earth's harshness taught us to be strong, but it also taught us to be wise." As the session concluded, David looked around the chamber one last time. Representatives of countless species worked together, sharing ideas and making plans. Earth was no longer seen as just another death world. It was recognized as the birthplace of a species that had turned adversity into advantage and survival into success. The galaxy had feared Class 13 death worlds, but Earth had shown them something new, that the deadliest conditions could produce the most valuable solutions if you just learned to see challenges as opportunities for growth.